I ended up, I would say maybe a little bit on accident in the nonprofit sector. In college, was asked to step in and help organize a student fundraising event for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And I had done a lot of volunteer work, but I'd never done any sort of fundraising like that. And I caught the bug and realized maybe this was something I wanted to do. I was a communications major, thought I was going to go into marketing. And when I spent a year working on this event and then ultimately interning for St. Jude, I realized, oh, I can make money doing this. It was it was kind of an accidental, fun way that I ended up there. I found that my co-curriculars in a lot of ways led me down the path to a career in service to others as opposed to working in the for-profit sector. I've had, I'd say, two mentors throughout my career. The first one, my first job. So when I did that fundraising event for St. Jude that got me into this, I ended up turning that into a job overseeing that program nationwide. And I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so it was a whole change. I didn't know anyone. And my boss's boss kind of took me under her wing. She had also moved to the city from elsewhere. And we quickly became not only friendly, but she was a really good guide for me in terms of what next steps I should be thinking about, when I should make a move, when I should try to get onto a task force or something like that. So she was really good at providing those opportunities. When I left that role, we stayed in touch. She continued to be a reference for me and was somebody who I was really engaged with. And then a little later in my career, as I progressed and moved up, another manager of mine, she's my current mentor. Somebody that I talk to on a regular basis. We haven't worked together in years, but she's the one I know I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got a problem or I've got a situation here and I just need somebody who's not in the organization to hear this out and tell me if I'm crazy, tell me if you think this is a good idea, just give me your feedback. And so she's been, her name's Cynthia, and Cynthia continues to be somebody that I have really entrusted with my career planning and thinking about the future. She's been an SVP for a very long time, and I just recently stepped into the role of an SVP. So I've made it. I've become Cynthia in some ways. I've followed her guide and her guidance, I should say. And it's been really great knowing that you've got somebody who has your back, who just wants to see you succeed and wants to help you along the way. After school, I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. I mentioned that earlier. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so it was a culture shock. I moved from the Northeast to the Deep South, and I'm so glad I did it. I learned pretty quickly that, no offense if anyone's from Memphis, it was not the place for me. And so, I was lucky that I had people on my side that I worked with, that mentor I mentioned earlier, who helped me to find ways to stay with St. Jude at that time, but to leave Memphis and go out and work in other field offices. But it was not my favorite experience, but I'm glad that I did it. It I think did a lot to help me figure out who I was as an adult, leaving college. But I think in addition to that, I am gay, and I did not come out to people when I moved to Memphis. I was a little terrified of the idea. Keep in mind, this was 2003, so it's a little different than it is today. But very conservative. A lot of people I worked with, there was a lot of conversation about what church I would join and things like that. And there was just this piece of me that I was like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this. And in the long run, I really wish I would have just told people, because I stayed in touch with a lot of them and they ultimately did find out and no one cared. And so I think for me, I wish I would have been more authentic for myself in my first job and let people know who I was, as opposed to keeping a part of my life kind of separate and away from them. But all in all, it was a really great learning experience, spending 2 years in Memphis, Tennessee, both in learning who I was, but also realizing that I need to just be out there and out in front and tell people who I am. And I'll share just as a side note to that, I now am very intentional when I interview that I mention my husband. Not a big deal, but I want people to know up front so they can make that decision. If that is going to be an issue for them, then they have the information and they can make that decision for them. themselves and for their company. But my husband also works in the nonprofit sector. He's a CEO of a small nonprofit that works nationwide, and we're both very intentional about making sure people know that we're married, and that it's not a big deal. So that would be my guidance and advice there about finding yourself.